Welcome back to the Safe Room, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, the President Sean Williams. We're back with another episode. Episode 92, guys. We're inching this closer to episode 100. If you know what time we're on, you best get with the program. But today, we have a fantastic guest. This is someone I've been keeping my eye out on for a while. And let's just say, she's got some amazing content. She has an amazing podcast, everything 90s, and if the name says it more, I mean, it's 90s talk, all right? If you ain't a 90s baby, then you might have to get out of the conversation, okay? But today, we got Shaleena. Shaleena, how's it going on?
Hello, Safe Room listeners. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing
Glad
really
to be
good.
here.
Yeah, I'm doing really good. It's early in the week, Monday. Usually for people, Mondays are bad, but I don't know. Today I'm in a good mood. So let's try to keep that positivity up.
Yes. Yeah, I'm good too. Good day.
Yeah,
Good Monday.
for sure. But like I said in the beginning, your podcast, everything 90s, again, it's basically all 90s talk where it has to do with maybe music, movies, fashion, just regular conversations. And I love how it exemplifies that. I feel like, a lot of people don't really talk about their generation coming up. I think that's really dope. And maybe it kind of motivated me maybe I need to do more 2000s conversations. For real. It's I feel like I'm missing out. It's going back into memory lane in a way.
Yeah, it's such a cool, interesting space I created or co-created with my listeners and guests. I feel like this world has been so crazy for the past couple of years, and just to have that quick hour or so to just reflect on the good things of the past it's a nice feeling. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And, we're definitely going to get more into detail for your podcast, Everything 90s. We're going to get to know more about, hopefully you as well, because, maybe some people may not know exactly what you're about, maybe just your background and everything, how you got into podcasting. And hopefully we can, share a little bit of different perspectives from a 90s baby, a 2000s baby. And guys, please, let's not have any conflict of interest in the chat or when you're listening to this, okay? This is a safe space. It's a safe room, okay? So we're here to just open up, have a vibe, okay? Nothing harmful, please.
It's all good. I have 4 brothers that were born in the 2000s. So
Oh, wow.
it's all good.
Oh, man.
A sister that was born in the late 90s. So it's all
Okay.
good.
At least you have some backup. You have backup right there. Perfect. So, all right, before we get into the actual questions, we're going to start with our main segment, which is the hot seat. Shaleena, don't even worry about the name. I know it might sound intimidating, but basically, it's 4 simple questions. I'm just going to ask about you, and you answer them to your best abilities, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, cool. So, question number 1. So, outside of the work that you do, tell me something about yourself in 1 sentence.
Oh. So when you say outside the work I do, are you talking about my work or podcasting? Or both?
It could be podcasting, it could be your work, it could be anything that makes you busy on a usual, any day.
Okay. All right. I'm not good at these questions. Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
You said tell you about myself, something about myself outside of work?
Yeah, outside of your podcast, any work related, tell me something about yourself in 1 sentence.
Okay. Who am I? I'd say I am a very calm, reflective individual. Very simple. I don't know if that's boring. I like to
not at all.
spend time with family and friends. Kind of a homebody. But yeah, I'd say calm, reflective, friendly person.
Perfect. That's absolutely perfect. And again, there's nothing wrong with being a homebody. For me, if I'm going out, there needs to be a purpose for me going out. I'm not just going out because I'm bored. It's if I'm heading to an event, I'll probably want to connect with people, get my name out there. Or maybe I'm attending, a certain function because, a friend invited me, or maybe there's something in the back of my mind that says I need to get this done. So I have to go out. I'm never just waking up randomly like, I'm about to go to Yorkdale. I'm going to go to Don Mills. Just like, because I just can't. Like, I'd rather stay in my home, chill, be on my phone, watch YouTube, watch TikTok, watch movie shows and everything. And like, that's life for me.
Hence why we're podcasters.
Exactly. Exactly. That is an absolute fact right there. For any podcaster who knows, like we love to stay inside our places. We don't want to go outside at all. So perfect, perfect. Okay, question number 2. So your favorite conversation surrounding anything like 90s talk, anything 90s talk. What has been like your favorite conversation you've done on your podcast?
I would say music and movies. Those two are a tie. I could talk about 90s movies, specifically like kid movies, because in the 90s I was a child. So all the movies that I loved growing up are kid movies. So, and then 90s music, pop, reggae, R&B is my jam.
I like that. I like that. Did you have a favorite 90s movie?
Oh, so many. Uh, let's see. If I had to choose one, it would be It Takes Two with the Olsen twins and Christy Alley.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a good take. That's a good take right there. And I can only imagine just like there's so much classics from that period, like the '90s and everything, in terms of like different movies. So like, honestly, if you tell me like, oh, I like this movie, and like, I can't disagree with you because like there's just so many to pick from. So like, but yeah, like for sure, like I can definitely resonate with the whole movies and like music, how that's like probably your favorite conversation. I feel like for anyone who really loves to like indulge himself when it comes to music and movies, it brings out something in you that's like, yo, I don't have to like worry about the next critic, what they say. I could just have the conversation with myself, with friends and family, and like we're just kind of vibing out. So like I definitely feel you on that sentiment.
Yes.
Perfect, perfect. So, going to question number 3. An interesting fact that you rarely share about yourself.
Ooh. Okay. This is also a random fact. When I was 18, I had surgery on my spine.
Oh,
Yes.
wow. Oh man, like I feel like there's a story coming. I mean, if you're comfortable with sharing, then like
Sure.
we can do that, but if not, we can move on.
No, that's okay. So this was in 2010. I had scoliosis. I was diagnosed with scoliosis, I think I was 13 or 14. So if anyone doesn't know what scoliosis is, it's when your spine is curved, it doesn't grow straight. So I had it all throughout end of middle school, throughout high school, and then end of high school, I ended up getting surgery on it. And what they did was cut open my back, went on into my spine, and then put metal rods and bolts to like straighten it. So currently I have metal in my spine.
Oh man.
But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know like that probably is something that like you probably would never forget because just
Oh
the
no, I
moment
still have the
itself.
scar.
Ooh. Yeah. Once you have the scars to remember, it's like no matter how much times you try to forget it, it's just always gonna be there.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. But I mean, like, at least I would say like that happened at like like a young age or at least earlier. So it's like okay, it didn't catch up to me like when I got older. So like at least
Right.
probably from this experience you've known to like adjust to it. Maybe now be more aware in terms of like how like you sit up and everything. Even for me, sometimes like I used to slouch, so now I try to do better, like just like standing up tall so that way it's just like I don't have to fall in that same situation. But like,
Oh, so yes, it's not scoliosis is not caused by slouching. It's just something in the hormones. It sets off your spine. It just doesn't grow straight. Nothing to do with slouching. It causes you to
oh,
slouch, but it's not caused by slouching.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
something I
yeah.
didn't know. Okay, so perfect. That's very interesting, actually. Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
guys. So for everyone listening, if you didn't know, now you know. Okay.
yeah, there's no actual, like, last time I read up on it, there's no known cause. It's just more common in females, and the onset is during puberty. So,
mm. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
That makes sense for sure. Okay. Well, yeah. That's still a fascinating story, and like usually when people share like a rare fact, people are kind of struggle or like they kind of come with the most like wackiest thing. That one was like very heartfelt, but I actually like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Moving on to the final question for this segment. What is your personal safe room?
Ooh, I would say my family, my my partner, significant other, and my podcast, I would say.
I like that one. I like
Yeah.
the podcast. But of course, like yeah, the families and friends definitely, like how would you say like your relationship like with your family and friends is? It's like really strong. Do you feel like they're inseparable in your life?
Yeah, for my I'd say that for my immediate family. So mom, stepdad, sister, brother, my grandparents on my mom's side I'm super close with. Uh, in my earlier years I lived with them. So they're a big huge part of my life. And friends, I don't have a lot of friends, but the friends that I do have, I'm close with, and my partner.
Well, I mean, like sometimes you don't need like 20,000 friends. If you have like a small inner circle that they support you in what you do, I feel like that's the best type of friends that you want. Like honestly, for me, I feel like I have a good amount of people where I have connected with, and it's like I support them and they support me in the stuff that I'm doing. So it's like that's cool. I don't need to like. It's not a popularity contest. I'm not like, oh, I'm trying to get like the most friends or I'm trying to get the most followers on social media. It's just like I could care less about that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, so like definitely like the friends and family, I share that, and I love like you said the podcast too, because I feel like for a lot of podcasters, when we grow more into the craft that we do, we start to realize that this is sort of like a safe space for us. We can speak how we want to speak. We don't have to worry about who's judging us, and I feel the more you're express yourself, people start to see a different side of you. Like for me, when I was young, and believe it or not, guys, like I was shy. Like I wasn't trying to like speak
Same.
that much.
Still am.
Yeah, for sure. And like I wasn't trying to say anything. But then, once I got into university, I started to like branch out, be a little bit more expressive with myself. Then the podcast came and then a lot of people were like, I didn't even know Sean could do this. Like this guy is going on, having long conversations, talking with people. It's just like it's shocking. So I feel like for you, with your podcast, it's like, wow, like she's so like vocal and like she gives so much energy to her podcast. Like Shalena's like awesome, but then like before you might know Shalena's like no, she was shy, like and like even for you to say that you're still
Exactly.
shy, it's like it still shows.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much it for the main segment. I think you did really good with answering the questions. So thank you for just kind of participating in that. But now we're gonna get into the actual questions itself. So we're gonna get into your podcast. So again, I just want to know like what made you like grow into that love and affection of like the 90s and then telling yourself, you know what, I actually want to start a podcast on this. I want to have these conversations with people who, come from that same generation or maybe with people who don't know much about the 90s and, they're just starting to get a first glimpse or a first listen for the, just to see what was about. So like where did that love come from and when did you started to apply it into, I want to create it into a podcast?
Great question. So I would say my love for the 90s, it stems from being a 90s baby. I was born in 91 and yeah, for me I had a very positive childhood from what I remember of it. And I feel like growing up in the 90s, as a 90 baby and a 90s kid, like there was so much happening, so much changes, but also like a rebirth of trends from like 80s, 70s. like when it comes to like the technology, like we witness so much. So like computers, cell phones, internet, video games, all that good stuff. So yeah, I had a pretty fond childhood, and what made me decide to start my podcast is in 2020 when all of us were like everything was shut down, we had to stay home. I found myself reflecting a lot on my childhood, old TV shows I used to watch on YTV, TVO Kids, and I'm like, hey, I want to. And before this, I had a podcast called The Sweet Tooth Vegan, which was an extension of my small baking business. So then that kind of slowed down. And then I kind of paused that. And then I'm like, okay, I want to create another podcast. So I'm like, I want to do something related to growing up in the 90s. And then came up with the idea. My first couple of guests were just friends and family members. And then, yeah, I'm still going strong.
Wow. Wow. There's a lot of things I took from that. First things first, YTV. I haven't heard that in years. Oh man. Like I remember coming home from school. That was the first thing I turned on. Man, oh
Yep.
man. YTV. TVO Kids as well. Damn. That's that
Yes.
that made me go back to memory lane just a moment right there. Um but yeah, like I definitely hear like your part where you say that when you started, you connected with friends and family. And I feel like if you're starting any podcast, that's kind of like your first batch of guests, like right off the jump. It's like sometimes you may not get that big top tier guest or that list of guests that you want. So it's like, I'm just going to kick it with my friends and family. Hopefully, I gets off the ground. So, like, I just want to know, like, when they saw you being like more confident with this push with the podcast and how these 90s conversations were gonna be like what was their reaction? Did they feel like, oh wow, like Shaleena actually has something special, like, I believe that she can really take it to the next level? Or was it just more of just like a normal like, okay, she's doing a podcast, that's cool, I guess, like what was their
Yeah,
initial
the
reaction? Because I'm
second
very
one.
curious.
But I think just my sister, like just the family that I live with, my immediate family, I think they're the only ones that know I have this podcast. And then my friends, they thought it was a cool idea. And I've met friends through the podcast. I've made some close friends. Yeah, this podcast has also been a blessing too. And it's, yeah, how I connected with my boyfriend through the podcast. So if I didn't have this podcast, I wouldn't have some of the friendships that I have now.
Well, that's really great to hear. Sometimes like a moment like that, especially you mentioned 2020. I feel like 2020 was a year of like self-realization for a lot of people. I started this in 2020. To be honest, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then like here I am, 2023, and it's like now I have so much ideas, so much plans. I've done so much conversation. So I felt like, even from you hearing your story, how you started in 2020 and like it's just branched out to the status it is now. That's such a strong thing to hold upon. I think that's really great, and especially having that connection with your friends and family. How everything kind of got stronger, from this podcast. I think that's absolutely beautiful. Also, you mentioned you started a podcast before Everything 90s, and like it was
Yes.
something about like a baking business. Get to that, cause I'm gonna let that one flew over my head. Like, that was like, wait, what?
I saw your reaction too. It was funny. Uh, so yes, I'm also a baker. I am a vegan baker, so the ingredients I don't use animals or animal byproducts. I started that business in 2019, 2018, and with the baking, I would also run a podcast where I would interview other vegans because I was the only vegan in my family when I decided to become a vegan. So it was kind of a lonely journey. So I created the podcast to reach out to other vegans, hear their stories. That one I haven't been active since 2020 or 2019. I think 2020. It's still available to listen to, but I haven't like updated it or anything. And The audio, I'm pretty sure, sounds horrible because back then I knew nothing about audio, the art of audio and proper podcasting audio. So I apologize in advance.
Oh man, I love that. I love how you just like, yeah, if you go back to audio shit, guys, it's not top
Yeah.
tier. And like I know that role too. Like, I don't know, listen, I might go on a little audio rant. Listen, do you know, for all the podcasters, if you know, like you're able to detect certain like frequencies like when someone speaks. So like I think the most common one, if you hear like those S and those T's, like it's so dirty to the point where it's like, oh, I can't. It sounds like bad ASMR. So like, I know how you feel in terms of like, I don't want to go back, but I think just going back to the whole vegan baker, I think that's really cool. I feel like that should have been like your interesting rare fact. I'm like, I would have.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's true. I forgot about that.
It's cool. I mean, it kind of just it got tied back into it anyway. But like, I think that's really dope. I mean, if listen, I think maybe 2023 is the year you might bring that podcast back. Maybe take that bakery to the next level. Bring it into like its own business. Who knows? I'm kind of pitching ideas for you. So like,
Yeah, yeah. I would love to restart the business. Like I still have my Instagram and website for it. So yeah, it's just been one of the challenges with that is the business insurance is expensive.
yeah,
So, but
that's gonna hit you
who
hard. I
knows?
know.
Oh, it did, and I had to stop. I'm like, I don't have enough money for this.
And it's cool. It's cool. Sometimes, there's a time and place for everything. That's what I always say. So like maybe it's just like it's not the time yet, but when it's ready, I'll get back to it and you'll see the reap the benefits. But yeah, for sure. So going on to the next question. So again, with your knowledge and passion towards the 90s, I just want to know, and again, this is not to like spark any drama. This is just me kind of like opening up. So how did you view like your experience like during the 2000s watching like the different shows and movies that dropped into like the 2000s but still being like 90s to the heart? Like what was your view like when growing up compared to your view today? Because I know sometimes when we grow up, you're probably thinking to yourself like, oh, it's not better than this show. Oh, it's not better than this movie. Like this 2000, it's cool, but it's not this masterpiece. But then you grow up and you're kind of learn to appreciate, the both, depending. So I just want to know, like, what was your like initial experience when you got in tune to like, more 2000s material when growing up compared to like today?
I love the 2000s as much as I love the 90s because I was also a child in the 2000s. So when 2000 hit, I was 10, right? Am I doing their numbers right?
1991.
9. I was
Yeah, it's
9.
good.
I was 9. And then, so yeah, I was still in elementary school and then high school, I graduated 2009. So yeah, the early 2000s was a huge chunk of my childhood, preteen, and teenage years too. So it's, in terms of like comparing, I don't know. Yeah, I think I love them both equally. Yeah, 2000s, I was heavily into like Lindsay Lohan, Hilary Duff, the Olsen twins still, because they were heavy in the 90s and also in the 2000s too. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question.
No, it does for sure. It does. And yeah, like I definitely hear you when it comes to like you watch 90s stuff, but also growing up in the 2000s, so you got a good dose of like both timelines and everything. I can say like for me, like again, I didn't get into the 90s stuff to like maybe like the late 2000s. That's when I started to like kind of open up a bit, and maybe it's because like I feel like for every kid in the 2000s, you might first discover the 90s when like maybe you're watching TV and like randomly there's like some 90s show or 90s movie pop on, and then it's just like you're born. It's like, oh, like what is this? And then like you learn to love it from there. So like I feel like no one as a kid is starting to like go and kind of navigate or see like, oh, what's out there in the 90s. It's like no, like you're a kid. You enjoy yourself. You're watching TV and now today you see how with streaming you could just search up and now you go back and you start to see like all these different shows and it's like wow, like I didn't even know these were out there. Like, oh yeah, I remember watching as a kid. Like maybe I should watch it again and see like what's my reaction now to it. So like I feel like we all have those growing periods where it's like we used to like one thing, but eventually learn to like grow and appreciate multiple things about like, the 90s and the 2000s. Now,
Yeah.
I know for me again, it was like watching it, I was like, yo, all these shows are fire. Like me today, I'm like, all these shows are fire. So it's like I don't even know why people have the whole argument of like, oh, this show's better, this movie's better, oh, the album for this was so much better. Who cares? Like you can enjoy whatever you want to enjoy. I don't see like why there has to be a whole fussle about it.
Hmm. I will say though, like me personally, I do prefer, like when it comes to music, I will say I feel like 90s and 80s music is better than like today's music. But I feel like everyone says that about their generation.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I will agree. Like in terms of like the music we see today, like yeah, this music's not even touching it. It's not even close. It's not even close. But like
Yeah.
obviously for me, I have like a sweet spot for the 2000s, especially like and listen for anyone listening, BET in the 2000s, man.
Oh yeah, 106 in Park.
The 106 in Park, look, that was a time. That was a time, man, where you had to wait there and see if your favorite song was in the top 10. Like before, it's like now, like we have Billboard and all that other stuff. But like back then, you had to sit down in front of the TV. I remember I was like, if it was 6 o'clock, I had to make sure I was sitting down watching it, everything. And even like sometimes on BET, like when it was like summertime and we had no school, they'd be playing like music videos on BET. And then like there
Hmm.
was that period that you could just guess what the next song was gonna be, and you were correct about it. That's how like in tune you were in. That's how much you were into it. So like
That's funny.
I definitely feel you in terms of like the 80s and 90s. Like that was such a time, especially for like the genre of R&B. I felt like that was like
Hmm.
chef's kiss right there. Like R&B was on another level. It's still on a good level today, but I feel like R&B back then it was like you had all like the top hitters there. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So it's actually funny that you mentioned today's generation, because I was the next follow-up question was about this generation. Like what, I don't know what's it called. Is it Gen Z, Gen X? I'm hearing a bunch of names. I don't even know what generation I would name this as, but like
Uh, I think it's Gen Z.
if it's
Could do
Gen
a
Z,
quick
then
Google
it's Gen
search.
Z. Because I don't know. I'm hearing a lot of like people say Gen Z. Some people are saying it's Gen X for like the much recent generation. I don't know what Gen X consists of. Is that like late 2010s or something like that?
Oh,
I don't know. I
Gen
mean,
Z is mid late 90s to early 2010s.
I never really understood like like the groups and everything, like the millennials, Gen Z, all that stuff. So like I just
Oh
kind
no
of
no no.
made it up in my
Gen
head.
X Gen X is like before the millennials.
Is it?
Gen X is
Because I'm
the
hearing people bringing that term back.
70s to 80s. Yeah, Gen X is mid 60s to early 80s. And then like the millennials, which I'm part of, that's from like 80s to late 90s, like mid 90s.
Yeah.
So I think now it's Gen Z, I think.
Yeah, Gen Z. I feel like
That's the
even if it's
generation we're
Gen
in
Z,
now.
I feel like I want to just split it in half. It's just like, okay, there's like the Gen Z that's like, okay, we're good, and then the Gen Z is like, yeah, we ain't cool, and like I'm not part of that ladder. I'm not the ladder. We in the
You're
we
in the
good
cool
era,
one.
okay? Yeah, we in the cool Gen Z. I but today, don't associate. Like honestly, I hate it when people like, oh, they ask me how old are you? I'm like, oh, like so now like I'm 22. It's like, oh, so like you're this generation? I'm like, what do you mean by that? It's just like like the current stuff with all like the streaming, the NFTs. I'm like, don't do that. Don't categorize me as that. I'm never ever gonna associate myself with that. But
That's
yeah, I
funny.
mean, I guess the more you know. Again, I didn't really focus that much in terms of like the groupings and everything like that. In terms of like where you fall under like a millennial, Gen Z, all that stuff. I didn't really gouge my eyes on that because I guess it wasn't really that much of a big deal. And maybe that's the whole point of this. The fact that for some people they don't take it as a big deal. Others they kind of define themselves from that, era that they're from. So
I claim millennial. I mean, I don't claim it, but I am a proud millennial. I'll say that.
enough said, enough said. Okay, perfect, perfect. So just to get to the next question, I did want to ask about like, your personal background because I know we talked about your podcast, but I just wanted to know like maybe what background you come from and how you try to express yourself like with your podcast in terms of like your own like personal self, maybe from where you come from. So like for me, for example, like my background is Grenada. I was born in Canada, but my background is Grenada in the Caribbean. So sometimes I feel like I have that excitement in myself that I kind of express on the podcast. That kind of comes from all Grenadians. We're always like very like giddy and like just fired up. So like maybe, you have something about that. Maybe you don't know. Maybe me just saying this for the first time, you're kind of thinking about it in terms of like, you know what? I do kind of have a trait that kind of comes from my background that kind of instills into my podcast. So like, I'm just trying to get your juices flowing just to see like,
Yeah,
is there a possible like chance of that?
great question. So my background's Jamaican, uh, and then my ancestors are from somewhere in West Africa, and also I have ancestors from India, and born in Canada. Yeah, I don't really talk much about Jamaican culture on my podcast, but I would be interested in doing like a episode exploring reggae in the 90s because that's a genre that I grew up listening to a lot as a kid and even till this day. So, yeah, I just had to find someone else that has the same passion, the same interest. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I haven't really touched much on Jamaican culture.
I mean, that's a good start. I like the topic idea, reggae in the 90s. So like just to follow up on that, like who were some of your favorite like artists to listen to like reggae in the 90s in terms of that?
Oh, I love Barris Hammond.
Yo, that's a
Um,
round of applause right there. Yes. Yes. Perfect answer.
um, Sanchez. Um, a little bit of Shaggy, not so much, not a lot of Shaggy. Um, and then like the oldies, they're not necessarily 90s, but like Dennis Brown, Bob Marley.
You're hitting all the marks right now,
Bo-
I'm being honest right now. Like
check, check.
yo.
Buju Banton, except for his like his song that he banned. We don't talk about that song, but he banned it and apologized for it. But I love his album. I think it's called Shiloh or Till Shiloh. It's like cloud background, and he has
Mhm.
like his short dreads. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I know
yeah,
what you're
that.
talking about.
And right now I love Chronix. He's not 90s, but Chronix, love his music.
Nah, there was not one bad answer right there. Barris Hammond, especially. Oh my gosh, like there's so much in this catalog. I listen like I feel like today's reggae, and I'm not even like trying to put any reggae listeners on blast. I feel I have such a difficult time trying to listen to reggae today compared to like music in the 90s. I feel like I could just turn on any like 90s reggae and like just jam out. Today is just like I feel more reggae, and maybe I'm wrong. This is my personal opinion. I feel like more reggae is starting to like infuse itself with like the dance hall sound. Like I feel like that's starting to come into play a bit, which is not bad. But I feel like like, you don't get that real old school reggae anymore. I don't hear it as often, especially if you're heading to like if guys, you head into those family functions, like the DJ, they're always playing reggae. So you
the
know the
same,
rhythms
the
by
same
heart.
songs. Yeah, that's so
They're like
funny.
you know the rhythms, you know what's next. Like you're literally going to the DJ, yo, play this one next, play this one next. Like
Yeah, yeah.
everything is like in your brain. And like I said, Barris Hammond, I always used to listen to him. Sanchez, that's a good answer too. Like even for me, like Other artists I listened to was like Morgan Heritage, Terrace Riley,
Oh yeah. Oh
Itana,
yeah.
Elaine, all Romaine Virgo, like those were people I listened to. Even like throwbacks, like Lucky Dube, Bunny Whaler, like those people, like I had a connection to.
Luciano. Yeah.
Yeah, Luciano, man, like. Yo, guys, we're putting you on. Like Shaleena and I are putting you
Yeah.
on. If you don't know any people, go listen to them.
That's right.
Like, I definitely hear you in terms of like the reggae's in the 90s, such the influence there. Like, I feel that's never gonna die. That's always gonna be there where people are gonna go back to and listen to that period. I feel like that was like such a golden age, in my opinion. That was just like you couldn't go wrong. You were getting all the top tracks, all the top albums, the best performances from there. I've always told myself I wanted to go to like a reggae concert, like at that period, just to see how everything was.
Yeah.
Just I would like to hear that conversation, however, in terms of like reggae's in the '90s. So if you are thinking about that, definitely
Okay,
let me
maybe
know.
you could be my guest since you said you listen to reggae. So you'll be my guest for that one.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, cool. So moving on to the next question. So although you shared a love and a passion for the 90s, were there things like in the 90s, let's say a show, song, or movie, where at first you thought to yourself as a kid, you know what, I don't think I'm vibing with this. I don't think this is like, I don't think it's good. It's like, it's meh, it's okay. Because I know like there were so much shows back then. I was like, this show is whack. This show is absolutely whack. And like, this is gonna shock a lot of people. For me, like the Sweet Life of Zach and Cody, I did not get it. At first, I was like, "What is this nonsense, bro? Like this is dumb." Like I was not vibing with it, and then all of a sudden, like I grow older, I go back to it, and I'm like, "Oh wow, this is actually a classic. Like this is really good." Like I think I was so focused on like there needs to be like some type of story when sometimes shows can just be for the comedy, and I think I lost sight of that as a kid. And when I went back to it, I was like, bro, this is too funny. It's too funny, man. Dylan and Cole Sprouse, bro, these guys are legendary in my books when it comes to that show. But for you, was there like a song, a movie, anything where at first as a kid or maybe even growing up, you're like, yeah, I don't think this is as good as I thought it was gonna be, but then you started to like grow on it later, like, you know what, this is actually better than I thought.
Um, Two things that come to mind. The first one would be the show The Famous Jet Jackson. I'm not sure if you are
It sounds
familiar with that
familiar.
one,
It
but
sounds
it's
familiar.
I think he's like the first black led character on Disney Channel. He was like a agent, um, secret agent by night, and then like a regular high school
Yeah.
student by day.
Yeah. Oh, I totally
Yeah.
forgot about that
So
show.
yeah. So I do remember as a kid I did like it, but I don't have memory of me watching it frequently. But then I did an episode on my podcast with one of my friends, and she kind of reminded me of like how it was a good show. So then I went back to watch it, and it was solid. So I would say that show and the singer Brandy. So when I was a kid, my first introduction to Brandy was Cinderella, and that's how I knew her. She was Cinderella. I didn't know about her in Moesha until high school. I didn't know her music. I probably heard of it on the radio, but I wasn't really paying much attention because at that time I'm like 8, 9, not really. I'm listening to Spice Girls and the Backstreet Boys. And then it wasn't until uh, late high school I started watching Moesha, got into Moesha, and then it wasn't until like my 20s, mid 20s, I started revisiting Brandy's catalog. I'm a huge fan now. I love Full Moon, and I love her current album B7. Those are my two favorites. I do love Never Say Never, but B7 I think is my favorite. But yeah,
Mm,
love Brandy.
I didn't.
Didn't know much
I did
about her in
not
the
expect you to say
90s, but
Brandy, man. That shocked me. That shocked me.
It's not that I didn't like her. It's just I wasn't aware. She wasn't on my wavelength. I was just watching her in Cinderella and Whitney Houston as the
Right.
godmother.
I feel you. I
So,
feel you. But yeah, I mean, again, I think for all of us growing up in our respective time periods, whether it was the '90s or 2000s, there was someone that we didn't really get, or maybe there was someone that when we heard them or saw them for the first time, it's just like, wasn't really gravitating to it, and eventually you grow to you actually adore them, you know. So I feel like we all go through that type of period. Like for me, like I don't know if there might have been one artist I heard that just I wasn't sure, but I'm trying to remember. It might have been a rapper, but I don't know exactly who. But actually no, it was a singer. Oh, it was Neo. It was Neo. For me, at first
oh,
I
love
was like,
Neo.
I first I thought he was the most corniest dude in the world. It's just like
Interesting.
it was just like I don't know, like him. He's like imagine like the typical simp today. I thought he was like the prototype to that. Honestly, I'm just like I can't get jiggy with this guy. I can't.
Oh, his songs had all the high school girls in the 2000s on a chokehold. Like in my generation, like
And
we
that's the
were
thing. I felt like he was just kind of like
obsessed.
like it's chick music and just stuff like that. And then like I went back to his catalog and I was like, bro, man, I was more wrong than ever, bro. Like there's just so much bangers. Like yo, like because of you, mad. Obviously the classics like Miss Independent, Closer. When you're mad is like probably my favorite. It might not be the most favorite for everyone, but like I don't know what it is. Like the build up to that, then the drop. Oh, so good, so good.
Yeah, when So Sick came out, there was so many remixes to that song. I think I was in grade 9 when it came out. Grade 9 or grade 10. So many remixes to So Sick. And I had all of them on my MP3. MP3 player. Do you know what that is?
Oh come on, I'm not that out of touch. I know where it's all love. It's all love. But yeah, definitely like listen guys, the 90s and 2000s overall, it was a time to be. It was such a time where honestly, if I had to go back, I wouldn't hesitate in a heartbeat, bro, just to relive. Like if even if I could stay like maybe the same age and just go back, I would just be going around parading everyone like, yo, this era is untouchable. Or you Shalena's like, yo, the '90s can't be like stop. Like that's how we feel. Like that's the passion both of us have. And again, this is coming from like two different people from two different like generations, and we're just kind of like sharing what we grew up to, and hopefully you guys are resonating. Maybe it gets you motivated to like, you know what? I want to know more about the 90s, or maybe I want to know more about the 2000s. Just kind of dive into both fields and maybe respect both. Again, we're not here to clash. This is not about which one's better or which one's the more dominant one. It's about just having a conversation and just chilling, just loving the 90s and the 2000s.
That's right.
Yes, absolutely. I want to start with like a TV show, and like these two shows in the back of my head, obviously, are like some of my favorites of all time. So, Shalina, I want to know: did you enjoy Martin or The Fresh Prince of Bel Air more?
I barely watched Martin, so by default, I guess the Fresh Prince of Bel Air. Yeah, when my uncle used to babysit me when I was young, I Fresh Prince was on the TV. So, but I wasn't really a watcher of the show in the 90s because again, I was a kid, not really on my radar. I was watching the cartoons, but growing up in my adulthood, in my 20s, mid early 20s, late 20s, and now I have grown to appreciate the show. But I haven't checked out
Mm,
Martin yet.
that's totally cool. For some people, like they may have watched one show more or the other. So, like for me, I started with Martin, and like I was immediately in love. I think Martin Lawrence killed that. Everyone on the show killed it. It was such a breath of fresh air. It was like it was the type of comedy that you weren't seeing today, where it was so cringe, or like it didn't even make me laugh. It actually made me more angry just to hear it. Like back, like hearing Martin for the first time, it actually made me laugh, like to the point where like I was crying tears and everything. So like it it just hit me so different. Same for Fresh Prince of Bel Air. Like obviously, like and it's even better when you're watching it with your family. So like it wasn't just me, like my sister, my mom. We would sit down and like even at Christmas time, if we had nothing to do, we would just watch like reruns, and like we would laugh so hard. We were so afraid of like waking up someone in the neighborhood because like it was so hilarious, absolutely hilarious. But I'm not even mad about your answer. Listen, whether you pick Fresh Prince, Martin, both of them are classics. So like there's no refuting that. Okay, so the next one I want to ask is surrounding music, but this one might be a little bit harder because I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head. Um, Maybe we'll do artists. So I guess which artist is, I guess, you felt had a much bigger impact, like for you in the 90s? So Mariah Carey or Whitney Houston?
Oh, Mariah Carey, for sure. I listened to her more than Whitney. Yeah, like I would say 1999, maybe 2000. That's when I started getting into Mariah Carey's catalog. And I still listen to her up until this day. I went to her concert back in
Really?
December when she was here. Yeah, she was
Wow.
fabulous.
That's really great to hear. Yeah, like okay, that's really interesting. I know a lot of people would have said like Whitney, because obviously just what she brought at the time. Everyone's just like, oh, Whitney's like different. She's 101. But no, listen, Mariah Carey ain't nothing to sleep at either, bro. Like Mariah Carey, she's obviously one of like the greatest performers of all time, definitely for her
And
period as
she's a
well.
songwriter. She writes her own songs. That's what makes her different from a lot of these powerhouse vocalists, singers. Is Mariah Carey actually writes her songs. So
I love how you
she
mentioned
has a
that. Just
one
like
up.
I love how you mentioned that. Just like for anyone who wants to say this person is better than Mariah Carey, like, do they write their own songs? I rest my case.
I mean, Whitney Houston had one of the best voices of all time too. So I don't disrespect her. It's just I gravitated more towards Mariah's music and songs.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, you know what? Just to ask another question. I don't know if you took a look at the lists for the top 200 singers of all time.
Oh,
That
I
was
was
from Rolling Stone.
disappointed. They okay. What I was satisfied with their number one choice being Aretha Franklin. Yes, but they did Michael Jackson so dirty. He was like so low on the
He was
list.
86, I think 86, 87.
So disrespectful. Disrespectful to Brandy. She was in like the hundreds. I'm just like, people call her the vocal Bible. So many R&B singers like follow her footsteps and draw inspiration from Brandy, and she's like in the hundreds. I was happy that my fellow Jamaicans were on the list. I think that yeah, they put Dennis Brown, but he was kind of low
Yeah.
on the list. But that list was very like all over the place. I don't know. What was your opinion?
Nah, no, the list was bad. It was a bad list. I mean, usually when you do lists like these, it's never good. I don't know why 200. If you did 100, probably they get a little less heat. It still probably would have been bad because it's Rolling Stone. But overall, yeah, it was a bad list. Obviously, Michael Jackson was very daunting to see. There was so much other people. I just thought like, why are they on the list and
Celine
everything?
Dion was not on the list.
I don't know,
Shania
man.
Twain was not on the list. Deborah Cox, she's up there with Whitney, in my opinion. Deborah Cox.
Yeah, so like.
She wasn't on the list. The only Canadian that was on the list, I think, was The Weeknd. I'm just like, you gonna put The Weeknd? You gonna put The Weeknd on, but not Celine Dion?
Yeah. And like, I don't even want to like get into the argument about, oh, this person's higher than that. It's just like, I know no one is ever going to put the perfect list, even if they try. But I think what the problem is that when you put yourself in those situations to make these lists, there's a certain expectation where it's like, I don't care even about the order. You can switch it as long as you don't mess up on who should be there, or at least give proper explanation as to why this person's on the list and why this person isn't. We're fine. But if you don't be upset. Like, I think there was literally like people were at Rolling Stones headquarters protesting about the whole Celine Dion
Oh,
situation. Like, it
wow.
was a mess.
Rightfully so. And I'm not even a huge fan of Celine, but I respect that she has a beautiful powerhouse voice, and she was a huge icon, still is a huge icon in the 90s. So that was shocking.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. I do not know, but it is what it is. So just to kind of wrap things up, I just want to ask like one simple question: Do you think? And again, this is just a question. Don't actually take it too seriously, but do you think that the '90s and the 2000s can get along? Personally, I don't even think that's a question that should be asked because I think like why is it that we have to ask ourselves if two generations can get along and to get along on what exactly? But I ask this because there are still people today that if you put them in a room, if you ask them about a certain tough topic, a certain subject matter, about what's better, and it has to do with 90s and 2000s, someone will obviously give an answer, but also they'll be so reluctant to be like, "Oh, this era is like not even close. Like it's dog shit. It's not top tier, right?" And trust me, Shalina, I've heard stuff like that. I heard stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like I do just want to like I want to ask the question to everyone listening. Do you think the 90s and the 2000s can get along? Because honestly, again, it's not a question I would ask. I think it's more of like why aren't we appreciating the 90s and the 2000s collectively more? That's what I'm saying.
Are you talking about like people that in those who are from those decades can if they can get along?
Yeah, I'm asking them because I don't think anyone like prior to that period or even like past that like, could really understand the animosity that we have. Cuz again, I've had conversations like this before and like surprisingly, when I ask people, "Hey, do you want to like, be part of this conversation?" It's like, "Cool." And I know people were born in the 2000s and I'm like, "Okay, so like I need you to kind of talk about your experience in 2000s." It's like, "Oh no, I'm not going to do that. I'm 90s." And it's like, "You're born in 2000." Oh, no, I'm talking 90s. It's like I'm lost. And then it's like when they have someone in the 90s, I'm like, "Okay, this person's reluctant to talk about the 2000s. Can you talk about the 2000s?" It's like, "No. No, I'm not going to do that." It's just like,
That's funny. In
yeah.
terms of like generations, yes, because I have, as I mentioned earlier, I have four siblings that were born in the 2000s, and we get along fine. I'm more closer with one of them, one out of the four. And then my sister, she's late 90s, but yeah, still get along. So from my experience, yes. But again, I'm a very peaceful person, so I try to get along with everyone. But although I am a 90s baby, I have no issues with representing the 2000s or defending the 2000s like in a given category. I did that with my 90s versus 2000s series last year with the music collabs category. I surprised my listeners by being Team 2000s and I won. So,
I love how you just like I was part of it and I won. So talk to me nice, guys.
but yeah, I think they could get along. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel you. Again, like I just asked the question because I feel like it's a very interesting thing to like think about. Again, there are some people who you might be born in one era, but actually like the opposite era more. It depends, just on your taste, how you want to be. Like for me, like I love the 2000s and I love the 90s equally. Like I don't care about what side I rep most. Like if I want to like be on team 90s, but I'm from the 2000s, that's cool. If I want to be on team 2000, I'm already born in 2000s, that's fine. It's just more of just kind of like if you feel happy with just like what you're consuming, because I feel like again from that time period there was so much memories we took from that, and we hold dearly. Like sometimes I wish we can go back into a time machine or bring those 90s and 2000s today, because I feel like this generation, now that's a conversation I'm gonna have to bring some on the podcast, because I'm trying to understand, like, I don't know what you guys be doing, but like this is what we did, this is what the 90s did, so you might want to take a lesson from there.
Yeah. I will say though, I do, in terms of like music, I will say I do kind of slightly prefer 80s music. Like if I had to choose, I'd do 80s, then 90s, then like early 2000s. I don't know about the music today in 2023. Couldn't tell you.
Yeah, no, it's probably like for you, like, all right, it's a certain point in 2000, then like that's the cut mark. Everything else, it's like, no.
Yeah, I think
just
2010 is like the cutoff for me.
Yeah, that's fair. That's if you ask me, like 2010, it's like maybe 2011, but 2010 is like okay, I'm pushing it a bit. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's pretty much it. So, Shaleena, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was a fantastic conversation. Love having you. Love you like sharing your perspective and everything. And hopefully, we'll be doing this very soon. I want to tell everyone what's the big announcement, because I did write that down. But eventually, I do want to have a big celebration for the 100th episode when it comes out. And let's just say we might be doing a 90s versus 2000 conversation in person, live. And let's just say,
Ooh,
I might reach out to Shaleena.
scandalous.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So like, yeah, maybe, I reach out to Shaleena and she'll be there to moderate it. I can't confirm or deny it, guys. I can't give out everything, all right? You're just gonna have to listen and just wait, and then when the announcement fully is revealed, then like you'll know the details. But Shaleena, again, we'll definitely be keeping in touch during the time being.
Yes, definitely. And thank you for having me on your show. This was a lot of fun.
Of course, of course. This was absolutely awesome. Let everyone know where they can find your podcasts on social media, any platforms.
Sure. So my podcast is available on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify. You could just search in Google Everything 90s Podcast and it'll pop up. I do have a website now. I'll probably give the link to Sean to put in the show notes. It's kind of long, but it's podpage.com/everything90s or everything-90s-podcast / it's long, so just head to the show notes. And
Oh,
I
wow.
have a new podcast that I am co-hosting with my friend Anika. It is called 90s Condo World, and it's a living single rewatch podcast. So if you like living single, or if you're interested in learning more about that show, check out our podcast. And yeah, that's
Definitely,
it.
definitely.
And I'm on Instagram, Everything 90s Podcast.
Okay, perfect, perfect. And yeah, I did see about the new podcast. I'm definitely gonna take a listen to it later on today. That's something I've been wanting to listen to for a while. But thank you again, Shaleena. Thank you to everyone listening to the Safe Room. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter, on TikTok and YouTube now. We started posting new content. I've been MIA on TikTok and YouTube since like last year summer, but it was recently I started posting more material, so expect more. I'm trying to be more consistent, but make sure you go check me out. I'll put that all in the show notes. Check out my website, www.thesaferoom.podcast.com, and make sure you subscribe to our newsletter as well. I'll be dropping one very, very soon from last year in December. Also, make sure that you guys are following the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music. And also, you want to go check out the intro and outro theme song for this podcast. It's on Apple Music, Spotify. It's from yours truly. Yes, I dropped this song back in 2021. It's the official theme song for the podcast. So make make sure you go check it out if you want to take a full listen to it. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Shaleena, thank you again for coming on the Safe Room. Thank you to everyone for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.